Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of the Finc Tank. This week we have got Mary Kirwin, and if you've been around long enough you may remember her.
Oh dear, bad start.
So Mary has got some of the biggest job titles that you can think of and aspire to. So she's been CCO, MD, MLRO of the places that we sometimes dream of working, like JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Allied Irish, Credit Suisse. But also quite interestingly, across a time when compliance was going through a real culture of shift. I begged, asked, cajoled Mary to come on the podcast for a few reasons. I really wanted to explore what it was like being an Irish woman in those roles, very senior roles where you're pushing back on people who perhaps hadn't had a woman, pushing back on them. And this was, we can talk about the context and the years and what was going through, but perhaps we could start a little bit further back on how you first got into it. So you trained as a lawyer initially, correct?
Yeah, well, the way I came to it was quite circuitous and funny in a way. I did a degree in languages first in Trinity College and was the person who, as well as studying German, was always hanging around the lawyers, which I thought was extremely odd because you weren't supposed to be near a lawyer as a mere art student. And I also was from a very working class background.
Yes.
So the kind of people doing law were not people from
Yes.
where I had come from.
Yeah.
But I did German. That was very interesting. I was very involved in debating, which has kind of informed some of what I'm doing still today. And writing, which is still something I like to do and I do a lot of. But after Trinity, I also spent a year, which is relevant, in Switzerland. We took a year out.
Okay.
And that fed into how I ended up in a Swiss bank much, much later.
Yeah.
So I knew Switzerland quite well. But I did the King's Inns, which was an adult learning kind of course that you could do to transition to doing law and become a barrister at night while working full time.
What?
Which I'm not sure I could do anymore.
Oh,
So by day I had a full-time job at an insurance company, and at 4 o'clock every day I drove across Dublin,
wow.
risking life and limb in Dublin traffic in my vintage car up to study law for 4 years in an accelerated program.
I was about to say that seems quite quick.
Yeah, you did 4 years in 2, and then you had to compete to get into the 2-year bar course for the barristers.
Were you top of the class?
I was not top of the class because I was exhausted from
I
doing
bet
my
you
day
were.
job. I
Yeah.
held my own, and I
Yeah.
was so happy doing law. It was just such a pleasure
What did you love
to
about it?
find myself. Well, it was something that I felt that I couldn't aspire to growing up. You know, people from my background, you only ever heard of priests, nuns, teachers, nurses, doctors. There was no other profession.
Yes.
Because my parents were working class people. You know, you had no mentor. You didn't know what else was out there in the world.
Yeah.
So to go to Trinity was a big deal.
I bet
I was
it
the
was.
first person in my family to go to university.
And Trinity of all places as well.
Trinity then was not considered somewhere where a good Catholic girl went. You were expected to go to UCD with the nuns. And so that was breaking barriers in a way.
Was it quite classist? I'm sure it was, but was it quite classist in Ireland then?
Well, it was very much, you know, the church, of
Right.
course, had a stranglehold on
Yeah.
the country. And yeah, it was a very difficult time, I think, for women, for many people. But to get into Trinity was considered, to want to get into Trinity was considered very odd. You know, why would you want to do such a thing?
Now everyone's like, please.
And I was absolutely resolute in my determination to do what I wanted to do. So there was no budging me from going to Trinity. I
Probably
was going
more
to Trinity.
so, you know, people saying you can't do it made you go, well, watch me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in school we got thumped as well too. There was a lot of physical violence in schools.
Wow.
So you learned to defend yourself.
Yeah.
You learned the world wasn't fair, you know.
Well, that is something I think we all learn the hard way, actually.
Yeah. And you learn to be paranoid and watch your back.
Yeah.
Also useful traits. So from all of that anyway, I went through Trinity, loved Trinity, would have stayed in Trinity for the rest of my life if I could have financed it, debating and messing around. Then got into the King's Inns, helped probably by a professor that I knew in Trinity
Yes.
who had connections, and was so happy doing law. I mean, I just couldn't get enough of it. Like academically, I loved it. I felt so privileged to be studying it.
Were there a lot of women in Ireland studying law then?
There was quite a few then coming up,
Yeah.
but they all went to the traditional areas. They were doing family law, they
Right.
were doing administrative law. And again, my stubbornness told me I was going to be a commercial lawyer or a litigator.
Yes.
And you really hadn't a hope unless you had a background.
Yeah. And by background, do you mean family connections?
Family connections.
Right.
Yeah, I had none. So I very quickly figured out after going to the bar to do your kind of year articling, that it was hopeless, that I would be sitting there or going to the cinema. I did a lot of going to the cinema when I was training to be a barrister. Eventually I decided I moved to Canada. I had friends from working one summer in Toronto. Yeah. And I moved to Canada, and I was in the big law firms there.
And how did you get the opportunity? Because to get into a big law firm, not now, but back then, it would have been connections wise. So did you use your connections or?
Well, I had a few friends who had some connections, but I got in on my own merit to some of the bigger friends back then. I mean, we had an exceptionally good black letter law background coming from Ireland.
What's black letter law?
Meaning the fundamentals, the basics.
Okay, right.
You know, I held my own in interviews and things like that. And I got into big firms on my own. I had a friend who was very connected into another bigger firm, and I eventually did get some help to get in there. And I did some white collar crime and criminal law.
There is a confidence that comes, and I'm saying this from personal experience, in changing countries where you don't have the hang-ups or the expectations around you. So I imagined you interviewed with a bit of freedom and panache.
Well, I don't know if freedom and panache was, you know, you're such an idiot when you're younger, or at least I was an idiot.
I was definitely an idiot.
I mean, I woke up one day probably and thought, this bar thing, I'm never going to make a bean here. I'm going to be a film critic at the rate I'm going from all the movies I was seeing. So I thought, you know, what the hell, I'll go to Toronto. And I became an expert at getting residency everywhere. Everywhere I've ever applied to get residency, I've been very good at the forms and managed to figure out, you know, the points system to get in and
game the system.
Education helps. But I just had no really sense of risk really back then. I had a few £100, still the pound back then, the Irish pound. I had a place to stay for 2 weeks max.
But sometimes
off I went.
if you overthink a problem, you'll find all the problems with it. So sometimes you just need to get up and go. And
I got up and gone with the suitcase and the maybe get a job.
You know, contact, getting off that plane and thinking, oh my God.
I have no memory of getting off the plane. I just, the one thing I do remember, which people laugh about to this day, is I managed to rent an apartment when I did initially get a job. And what I didn't realise, it was actually a tough neighbourhood, but I had no clue. I was dazzled by the fact that I had hot water on demand. Those Canadians had hot water on demand. You put the tap on and that bath.
You were in the luxury life.
Hot water, you know, which was not a thing in Ireland and England. Even now, you know, it can be a struggle. I was absolutely fascinated with the fact I could have hot water. So the Canadians thought I came from some Neanderthal place, you know, like what's wrong with her? So it wasn't easy to impress me for the first few years. Everything was new and big and shiny.
Yeah, but then enthusiasm, you know, there's something to be said about a sunny side of life perception. Yeah. So how long did you stay in Canada for?
I was in Canada on and off, mainly on for the best part of 14 years.
Gosh.
Worked for big law firms.
Still specialising in?
I was a litigator, so I did a lot of commercial litigation. I did quite a bit of white collar crime.
How interesting.
Tax evasion was a thing that I got into. Where the firm ended up defending criminal tax charges for big clients.
Them.
So that came in very useful subsequently. And still to this day is useful. I then got an opportunity to be one of the first commercial lawyers hired into a new anti-money laundering unit being set up by the Federal Department of Justice.
Do you mind me asking when that was?
It's back in the annals of time. I don't even remember anymore, Jess. It's a long time ago. But I interviewed for that. They wanted commercial lawyers who knew some criminal law.
Okay.
And they were scarce. I ended up doing massive drug trials with very, very minimum criminal defence lawyer experience, or any kind of criminal experience. So to this day, that is without a shadow of a doubt the hardest thing I've ever done, facing seasoned criminal lawyers as a newbie Irish person with the Irish accent.
Who probably had a lot of money thrown at them to get the best of the best, to get this off this charge.
Yes. Absolute drugs. So they were lawyered up to the hilt.
Yes.
The proceeds of crime were paying the lawyers.
Yeah, of course.
And it was me on my own, looking probably half terrified on big cases.
Is there a particular case that stands out that you think?
Yeah, there was a couple, because you tended to be on the same case for quite a long time because they ran and ran and ran. And I would get up and try every legal argument I could think of, like commercial law arguments that they'd never heard in their lives, to try and stop these guys from walking with the money. Yeah. Because back then, only marginally improved. It was almost impossible to take the money off them. You might get a conviction for money laundering. Yeah. Tough, but you might get a conviction. But then seizing their assets was phenomenally difficult.
Because they're just hidden and weaved and...
Yeah, and the proof points were too much. You couldn't prove it. You had to almost prove 1-to-1 between every dollar and the drugs and them.
Oh my gosh.
The connection had to be so tight. It was incredibly difficult to get
and they would know that, of course, and they'd have all crafty accountants.
And they would bring motion after motion and accuse you of lying, and so it was gloves off time,
Wow.
And I would get so frustrated with this outrageous, undignified approach to the law, and they'd be all thinking, where'd your woman come out of? Like they would.
Proper. No.
Yeah, and it was an outrage. I was outraged all the time.
They say that connection is the foundation for cooperation. So if you don't have a connection with someone in your team or someone you've got to deliver a really bad message to, you're not going to be able to pull any cooperation out of them.
No.
Yeah.
And I suppose that led me to, much later on in financial crime teams, to make very significant efforts to have as multicultural teams as possible, to bring in people if I could.
Thank you for my segue. Because you do have a reputation, not only of having teams that are diverse in experience, ethnicity, gender, whatever it may have you, but you also know everyone in your team, which sounds really bizarre. But if you know the team sizes that you were dealing with, you seem to seek out and find people in your team that could do with a bit of helping hand.
Well, I made a point always of doing one-to-ones with everybody, like going down as far as I could go within human reason. And then I would have like regular skip 1, 2, 3 meetings where I would reach out down into the team. But what I also did a thing where I would have an open hour once a week, and that was very funny in a few places where I thought nobody'd be interested.
Yeah.
And at the time, I actually had a human PA, which today I would die for still, because to have a human PA. And my poor human PA was the one who I said, look, we're going to have an open hour every week. Yeah. And you can tell people, could have been as much as 30 people in one of them. You can come in and talk about anything. You don't have to have a big, deep financial crime topic.
Yeah.
You can come in and have a chat. I'll give you half an hour, say, and we'll spend a day at this, whatever. And I thought, nobody's going to be interested. We're going to be we'll be doing something else. Well, we were inundated with requests, and the PA then had to manage this out.
But what drove you to do that, the open hour?
Well, first of all, I wanted them to have a safe harbour, that there was something going on. The things that I found out during those half an hours that I would have never heard about. Dissension between teams, stuff going on that they would have never told me out in public.
And also maybe not in a formalised meeting room, like let's have a...
Yeah, no way. But I've heard people were fighting. There was cases I found out where people were being bullied in some cases. Or I'd be found out that there was no IT people left because they'd actually be all fired, even though I was dependent on them. So I would find out incredible stuff in the half an hour. Yeah. Some people would come in just to brown nose for half an hour.
Oh, I would have done
You'd see them coming.
I would have come with some chocolates.
And you'd give you were there to serve, so whatever made people feel better. But you would find out genuinely useful information, and I would say to them, if you have a suggestion, it will get my full attention, but it has to be a real meaningful suggestion. I'd like you to put it on the page, because I can't remember everything from 30 people weekly. And I got some very good suggestions.
Yeah.
And then I would say to them, what would help you do your job? Is it more training? Is it more resource? And I would find out very interesting, what I found out over the years, Jess, was sometimes very mundane things that you wouldn't think about made a huge difference to the lives of some of your people.
Like what?
One that repeatedly came up was you have your people doing, say, negative news searches, adverse media, who in many cases don't have access to the internet because security have locked them out.
I mean, that still happens now.
How in God's name are they supposed to get any negative media if they don't have access to the internet? So I'd say, okay, you got me.
It's no brainer.
Give me a. So I would traipse down to the security guys, and I worked in cyber as well, a whole other career. So I knew my stuff in cyber. So I would traipse down, and sometimes I'd be a little bit less overt in that I would befriend the chief security officer first through a few drinks or a cup of coffee. And I'd work on them and say, now, come on, give me a break. This is just really, come on, They work for me, for Christ's sake. If they were criminals, I wouldn't have them working for me. So I would usually manage to free up a few of the team had access. The others would be there kind of having to rely on them. I rarely got the full team. But things like that would really help. Or it was usually small technical tweaks.
Yeah.
No workflow tools, for instance, or rubbish workflow tools. No SARS database, so that they had actually designed their own app one afternoon at 5 o'clock because they had coded up something.
Yeah.
Ludicrous stuff.
Did you start that day one jumping into roles, or
pretty early on I would do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pretty well did it everywhere I worked because I wanted to know the people. And the other very useful thing I found about it is I would let the conversation be quite wide ranging, because I've always found that the people who can really help you deliver, particularly on complex problems, are not the obvious people in the obvious departments. They could be 50 layers away. They could be an entirely different part of the bank. They almost never have a title. They've become the guru of a cryptic weirdo area.
I think everyone knows who you're talking about. You know,
Right.
like everyone's got that company.
Yeah, and
go ask Brian, he'll know.
Yeah, and I would make it my mission in life to find them and hunt them down.
Yeah.
And then, you get them on side, and then if they really help you out, and many did, I can think of several who did help me out in a very major way. Not in financial crime at all, it'd be in other areas, payments, SWIFT, it'd be in something else. Then you have to help them out. Like, it's a two-way street.
Of
so I
course.
would go to bat for them to get them promoted, because they'd been stuck 5 layers down for 10 years because nobody thought of them.
Everyone just thought, oh, they're just down there doing that. Yeah.
So then you got to pull them up. You
do have to pull people up, though.
You got to pull them up.
And intentionally so, which I think a lot of people think, oh, my people will follow me. No, I have some really strong CCOs that reach back and yank people back up with them.
Now, some of them, what you find, which I was always astonished by, don't want to be yanked actually and say, please God, don't get me promoted. Just leave me alone. I have a lovely quiet number here. Please go away. But most of the time, people were very interested to be put up a level or whatever. They didn't want to necessarily come rocking in as an MD or something, but they wanted some respect and acknowledgement like everybody. And so making friends in large organisations, every conceivable place, is something I made it my mission to do as fast as possible.
Far-reaching corners as possible. But it's an interesting style of management. When you first came into the city, how has it changed? How would you see it have changed from when you first joined as a senior position? Because, sorry, for those who haven't investigated you like I have,
Oh dear.
the context of you joining like the JP Morgans and the Deutsche Banks and the Allied Irish, there was always a fight to be fought, as is usually the case, but there was an uplift on culture and compliance. There was people in the room that didn't necessarily like being told by compliance, let alone a woman. Did you face those battles often, or was it kind of just because the job title protected you?
I would say the biggest battle I fought, when I moved back from Canada to Ireland, I had worked for a few years then in tech. After I prosecuted, I did a master's degree in business in IT, in management information systems, actually. And relevant from that is I did courses in project management and expert systems and things like that, which is helpful today.
Yeah.
But I ended up working for JP Morgan, having thought I was working for a kind of an entrepreneurial kind of startup payments company in Dublin.
Yeah.
But they were half owned by First Data, and JP Morgan were interested in the business. And very shortly I discovered I was working for JP Morgan. The plus on that, which English people don't always necessarily know, is that the Irish and Americans have this symbiotic relationship. So I had dealt a hell of a lot with Americans when I lived in Canada.
Yeah.
I did cross-border work regularly. I very much enjoyed working for them. I worked with their lawyers on all kinds of issues. We discovered we needed a banking license, actually. And JP sent in all their top lawyers. And I got a great kick out of that, dealing with the Yanks, because they'll often have such clever people,
Yeah.
so competent. So that was fun. So I wouldn't say that was... probably I had more of a challenge in that there was a heavy payments security element to that job, and you would sometimes find that the very technical people would try to talk down to you there.
Do you think as a woman or as compliance?
I think as a woman, and as a woman speaking to techies who usually assume, that's changed a bit, the woman hadn't a notion,
Right.
or there was usually maths involved because there was cryptography and there was
Okay.
So you had to fight your corner there to gain respect. But I had been in rooms in Toronto, in America, with 50 engineers. I was the only woman. So that didn't actually throw me at all. The bigger cultural shock was moving from Allied Irish Bank to Credit Suisse after doing a great number of interviews, where you were coming from what was considered a small retail Irish bank to a monolith, you know, to the big Swiss.
Yes.
And you're this Irish woman, and why are you here? You know, what right have you to be
Why
here?
wouldn't we hire Francois?
Exactly. Or somebody coming from JP Morgan in the city. But the board of Credit Suisse wanted to elevate the role from a director level to an MD role. I had to fight 10, 12 interviews for that job and prove myself. And then prove myself all over to the board, who were kind of feeling quite wounded because things hadn't been going so well. I'm on the financial crime side. And also with the staff and with the business. I faced that in Canada a bit too. You know, you'd have people making, when I first arrived in Canada, you've reminded me, Jess, senior lawyers would ask me if I had my leprechaun out in the lobby.
Sorry, my mouth just dropped. I just realised not everyone can hear that.
Yeah, and I mean, they meant well. It wasn't maliciously meant. It was a joke. But that would, you know, kind of
nowadays that would be a
that nowadays. But back then that wasn't. It was kind of a
But you just must have thought, oh, F off.
Yeah, I would say, oh no, the leprechaun, I left him behind today. I don't have a leprechaun. Or you'd get sometimes if you were a bit late back from lunch, were you in the pub? I didn't really drink very much. I still don't. So no, I wasn't in the pub. People didn't know there was a separation between the north and south of Ireland. Lawyers?
I didn't actually know that though.
Okay, fair enough.
No, we're too far away from Ireland to know that.
Yeah, you're too far away. But Canada's a bit closer to it, Jess. So I was a bit shocked by that. But, you know, you learn to kind of navigate your way around. It probably gave me a respect for the underdog a bit. And, you know, minorities and...
Yes, and allies, and having people like, you know, you when you're talking about the woman in the jury and making sure that you've got connections with people. It's an interesting point that we're kind of dancing around a little bit, and it's the management style of women versus men. And I am going to caveat this, which is not saying that men don't lean into relationships and styles, but women, I find, are naturally more empathetic. They seek connection before they seek authority. I wondered, have you ever felt that you've had a pushback on that management style in your career?
My natural preference is to kind of make friends, to try and be collegial, to identify talent, to help and to collaborate. But there's no question, particularly in investment banks, that if you don't have the fight in you, you're dead, really. So, I mean, I think we talked about this before, Jess. I would never use it in offense, but I will defend myself. Like I learned as a small child that if you have to defend yourself, you defend yourself. So there were times when you faced traders or you faced the business and you were just this little woman who, how would you know any better? You know, this is a big deal. I remember lawyers would condescend to me saying, well, this is derivatives. How could you know what a derivative is? I know you did some litigation, but derivatives, and this is a complex leverage deal. And you'd say, and I used to say, give me a break. You know, I would say, if you can't explain this to me the way that my mother would understand, I'm going to assume you've got a big problem here. I ain't signing off on this sucker no matter what you tell me. So,
Amen. I saw that on your LinkedIn. If you can't explain it simply, you do not understand it. I was like, preach.
I will not. To me, the more complicated the problem, the more need to boil it down to its most simplistic. And that is my ethos in kind of everything I do in financial crime as well too. So the line on, this was the worst line that they could possibly pull on me, was the kind of just derivatives, just leverage. And when I arrived in Credit Suisse first, it was said to me several times that you came from retail. You couldn't understand investment banking. You need to be in investment banking your whole life. You need to live and breathe it to comprehend investment banking. And I said, I don't think so.
It's not that
I
complex.
represented clients in Canada from all walks of life, including banks. And, you know, if you're going to pull that one on me, I'm going to assume you've got a problem. You know, you've got an Achilles heel that you're trying to hide from me. And I will find it, you know. So I got a lot of that. And I mean, it's not that there wasn't a learning curve, but like I'm an inveterate learner. So the idea that if I didn't understand a concept that I wouldn't get my head around it, to me was deeply insulting.
Of course it was.
But there was some very good people in the bank as well too. The leaders, the CEOs were excellent, and they were not of that mind frame at all. They were much more collegial and knew everybody in the old school bankers.
Yeah, the old school,
They were very good.
And on that, what do you think makes a good senior leader? Not just like your level, but who you would report up to. What makes you go, oh, wow, I'd like to work for you?
People who are ethical, kind of, that's become a bit of a buzzword now, Jess, but people who genuinely do care about both the organisation and the people who deliver it. So when I can think of a couple of the CEOs that I worked for, they knew everybody. You know, they knew even the person who was in the mail room. You know what I mean? They knew everybody. They had a real sense that they were creating something much more than kind of the sum of its parts. You don't see that many of them again. I can think of only a few people, sadly, in my life that I can say that about.
The path to CEO is changing though, isn't it? Like it's a different type of person that's coming into, and they're sometimes a little bit more tech or product driven.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe they're less on the relationship side.
Yeah, less on the relationship side. And I mean, one of my great heroes in life, mainly because there's so few of them, was the CEO, the old CEO of Costco in the US, who was famous from his ethical business, and he refused to let people go during various financial crises and drove shareholder value through doing the right thing by everybody. So unfortunately, those people are few and far between. So you have to find your own compass as best you can. But I'm pretty good at sniffing out the people who will pull a fast one, or who don't believe what I believe or who just believe it's all about money.
It was interesting when you look at the sum of your career, you have picked quite aggressive environments and you've always gone headfirst into them as well.
Sign of idiocy, maybe,
No, I think it's nice that you did, and you didn't shy away from the challenge, because I know a lot of people look at those banks and what was going on there. Deutsche Bank is a really good example about what was going on there. That was a headache and a half, and the pressure that they had internationally in the UK and in Germany would have been a lot.
First of all, the bigger the mess, the better in a way. But let me kind of explain that, because the mess is not interesting unless the people in charge are determined to fix it, right? So I've ended up in places where the mess was great and was academically, intellectually interesting.
But the pot wasn't boiling.
Yeah, but the pot wasn't boiling, or the pot was going to boil forever.
Yeah.
And my timelines for kind of fixing things were far more aggressive.
Yeah.
So the perfect storm is a big, gnarly, horrible problem, very irritated regulators.
Yes.
Is then you really got to get stuck in.
Everyone's dream situation.
Everybody's really upset. But the board and the exco have decided we're going to fix it. Whatever it takes, we're going to fix it. That actually was the situation at Credit Suisse, for instance. That was the situation at AIB when I was there, because there was a very large central bank visit and there was a big exercise to be done. That is, to me, is like the dream job, is where the stars align and they want someone who will come in and literally turn themselves inside out to fix the thing and pull on every lever in the bank to make it happen.
Are they honest in those interviews? I'm always curious with these, in the room where it happens. Do you get to actually ask?
No, they'll pretty well always tell you something that's not true. But it's usually, I've come to the conclusion, because they actually don't know.
Yeah, okay.
I can think of only one occasion where it was getting close to just downright not true. The one that always still, it makes me smile in a way, and I'm sure you've heard it in jobs, is you'll interview someone and they'll always say to you, can you take us from a 5 to a 9 out of 10? And I'll say, no, that's probably almost certainly no, because I've never seen that ever. So no. So then you turn it back on them and you say, where are you now? And you look them in the eye. I've never heard anybody say to me, well, we're usually a 6.
We're usually a B+.
And I'm thinking 4 is a pass, right? I'm being generous. Like it's a 4, say is a pass. The number of times when I went in and in 3 months, I knew it was a 3.5.
But they probably, like you say, didn't know. They don't.
Most of the time they did not know, and I'm always mystified as to how they don't know. But that's become like, when I hear someone saying to me, oh, we're 7 out of 10, I think this must be really bad. They're in deep, deep trouble now. Like, this is much worse than I thought.
If even they can say it.
Yeah, if even they didn't say it. So it's very rare.
Yeah.
If you go in and it's clearly a basket case,
yeah,
you're kind of, you know what you're getting. But a lot of the time they really genuinely think it's all grand.
Yeah, well, but now you're contracting and everyone knows it's a mess, and they
yeah, when you're the only thing with the contracting is you have bits of it.
Yeah.
So what I do miss is that when you have the whole horrible mess, it all falls on you, but at least you're the kind of you're the connector that makes it all happen or not.
Yeah.
Whereas contracting, you do a bit of the problem and you never know what happens.
Yeah, I suppose.
You know, you did a bit of this, you did a bit of that. So what's more rewarding nowadays is when you can help grow the talent that is there, that you hope will pull those levers in the future and, you know, fix it.
Well, you and I have spoken extensively about sort of spotting talent in your teams and diversifying the teams and mentoring. If someone was listening to this and they're sort of midway through their career and they're thinking, I want to stand out to a Mary, like if Mary, you know, if you came into my business, or if someone like you came into my business, apart from the obvious, like working hard and working late and right attitude, what really kind of makes you go, oh, that's someone that could do with a bit of a spotlight?
Well, I have to confess, I would have a preference, and I have to work on that at a personal level. People who are very, very sharp and very quick will get my attention. And, you know, you have to be a bit careful of that. I'm a great believer of the whole Gallup Strength Finder thing. I can't even remember what it's called anymore. Somebody bought them. But it's where you put your teams through an exercise to find out what their strengths are. It's not focused on weaknesses. It's very good. So you might find that one person is a brilliant collaborator. Yeah. Like if you want to pull people together, you send them out. Then you have the person who's a strategic genius or the really sharp-witted person. And there's a name for all this. So I learned that I had to be careful about that, because the really, truly bright spark, who might be hidden now, they're not always obvious. So I think I'd probably have a talent of finding them, because they're not. If it was obvious, someone else would have found them. But, but you have to remember that teams need different strengths. So you can't have a team full of geniuses, right? You know, you need the people who can collaborate, the people who are great team builders, the people who are empathic. You know, so there's a different set of skills. But the person who jumps out at me will always be the person who's very quick to reach the conclusion on a complex set of facts. And they're often very young, you know, which is great. And the ones who are fearless, who are prepared to, you know, you say to them, look, I need information from the business and IT. And people say, oh, there's no way you're getting that. We've been asking for 25 years. To me, that's like a red flag to a bull. I think this is number one here. So you find the likely person who will send out as an emissary. And you say, I formally, you know, it's like, you know, it's Sir Galahad, you know, I make you are now entitled, authorised to go out and be my ambassador. Find out. Yeah. So I can think of several kids who were brilliant at sidling up to IT or whatever, or they knew everybody, you know, and they would find out what I needed to know.
But that again goes to your connection point.
You find the people who enjoy being intel gatherers. Yeah. And that makes such an enormous difference then.
But it's almost like a building block to what you're talking about, what you do. Like, you know, the connections, the 4 points of connections across the business and getting to know people. You know, it's not always the loudest person as well.
Oh, no.
No, it's not saying extroverts are more, you know, more interesting. They're just people who have a natural curiosity. I wonder what the IT guy does, or having conversations in the, you know, I think it's really
Well, I love IT. So another one of my strange, weird, you know, quirks is that the first thing practically I do, other than setting up meetings to speak to everybody, is I befriend IT. So whoever is in charge of IT is almost certain to be hunted down by Mary.
But they're usually most ignored as well, you know. They're
disastrous. And then you discover that, particularly in the large banks, you discover that there's multiple audit items, remediation items, FCA related, where it's all IT.
Yep.
And nobody has bothered to ask IT if they actually have the bodies to deliver. And you discover that IT have actually fired everybody where there's a fighting chance of delivering. And there's no way in hell that IT are going to deliver. So then what I do then is I will team up with the head of IT or whatever that it is and go out together to get the resource or to get the funding. So I'm a great believer that these complex problems are only solved collectively. So the idea that financial crime, whether you're an MD or not, can say, this is an outrage. I want IT to fix this. I'm done. Right?
But it's that authoritarian structure that just pisses people off. Like,
just
connection versus collaboration. Like, how are you going to ask someone to help you do something that's a little bit trickier than what they do day to day if they think you're a bit of a walnut?
And a bit of an ass, really, frankly.
I was trying to be nuts about it.
So, you know, like if you... So I've often come across problems where almost 85% IT, and I say, well, what does IT have to say about it? They just have to do it. I say, oh, no. That's not the way humans work.
That's not the way humans work. Yes.
We got to befriend IT, find out what IT need,
Yeah.
and I will help them get it.
Yeah.
And then you, IT think, oh, this chick can actually help me out here. So, of course, I'm going to help her out in return, and we're going to solve a problem that has been hanging around since the beginning of time.
But exactly, like getting that viewpoint, like we don't know what we don't know, right? Particularly someone who's not as IT as you, a CCO. If they maybe had IT looking at a problem, they see it with a completely different lens and completely different experience that could be adding value right straight away.
And you'll find out interesting things when I'll get very in the details. So I'll find sometimes there's been a problem with a large project that's been going on forever. So I think, okay, I'm going to find out what's going on here. And you get them all on a call or whatever. And you discover the actual reason is that the guy in London who's got his piece of the IT has to get collaboration from the head of IT in Asia, who's a woman. And he treats her like a dog. And you listen to this going on and you think,
I wouldn't want to
she's
help
not
you
going
either.
to give him anything because she's been condescended to by this guy.
Yeah.
So then I have to say, hang on a second, Johnny. Like if you spoke to me like that, the chances of me giving you the IT resource that I need to get the problem solved is zero. So you're going to play nice. And I am going to tell this woman that she's not going to be listening to this again. We are going to fix this. So most of the time for me, solving problems is not genius-like intervention by Mary. It is helping the humans to work together and to have a better day at the office.
Yeah.
Because there's something horrible going wrong that means that they don't solve the problem ever.
Yep.
And the problem is actually totally fixable, but all of the impediments to fixing it have been human created. They're human creations.
Of course. Yeah.
And when you eventually do fix that, the sense of achievement is enormous because now you have people speaking to each other.
Yeah, and hopefully it won't be a huge bump in the road later on,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
And that whether you're gone or not gone or whatever, at least you've sent the signal that these things can be fixed.
You've created a softer culture, a less...
Yeah.
Wow. You can hope anyway.
You can hope.
I wanted to speak also about your new love, passion, knowledge and AI. How did that come about? Because you're a Perplexity Fellow, and what does that actually mean?
Well, I'm the Fellow of the American Bar just means it's like an honour that other members of the American Bar, other lawyers, American lawyers are members of the American Bar Association.
I thought there was for an AI company you were a...
No, I have I'm a member of a fellowship of Perplexity, which is one of the AI agentic.
Yes.
And it's not such a big deal, but I think the first 500 or 600 people who applied probably were accepted. But I'm a big user of Perplexity, but it's a kind of a natural evolution just because I worked in cybersecurity in Canada for several years. I have credentials in cybersecurity since the early 2000s, quite technical ones, although I wouldn't hold myself out to be a techie, but I know a lot about encryption and security. And I did my master's in business and IT as well in University College Dublin. So I've seen all the tech bubbles and all the tech stuff. I've worked for tech companies. I've worked for startup tech companies in Toronto. So to me, it's in a way, it's just another tech. It's just more tech. But the labeling is very clever. Like I have to, there's an awful lot of hype and nonsense talked about it, and the idea that a sentient AI is going to take over the world. I'm deeply skeptical about all of this.
Really?
Oh my God, I think it's all nonsense, really.
Really?
Yeah, I don't buy any of that.
And why don't you believe it?
Because the capabilities of it right now are so vastly inferior to our human capacity that I see no potential for some massive breakthrough anytime soon. I mean, of course I can be wrong, but the capabilities right now, the gap between getting to human level capability, I'm not going to say intelligence because it's so poorly defined, is vast. I mean, AI can't even transfer its knowledge from one model to another. So if you're one of these big models that beat everybody in the world in chess, if I ask you to play, I mean, these are problems they're working on, but there's no easy solutions. You ask it to play X's and O's or something like that. It can't transfer its knowledge from one domain to the other. So they call this the transfer problem. So that's
Is that what they're talking about?
There's one of many, many problems that they have with the technology. It doesn't truly comprehend anything. It makes connections. It's machine learning, really.
Yeah.
But, so I'm not saying it can't be incredibly useful, but HAL, I'm not worried about HAL anytime soon, taking over the mothership.
Do you think we're too quick to adopt it as financial institutions?
I think if you looked at the reality, I'm always looking at the stats because I'm always very data driven. The reality behind the grandiose statements about how it's been used are very different in the reality. It's been used for the AI agent thing is enormous, I think, and I use it myself multiple
You mean like
times a day.
ChatGPT type?
Yeah,
thing?
ChatGPT. I like Perplexity, but yes,
Yes.
the ChatGPT that can be incredibly useful, but also makes
Scary.
horrendous mistakes as well. But you know, when you're talking about the big, large language models, and
sorry, just in case people like me are listening and don't know what you mean by large language models, what's that? What's the difference?
most of us, when we use AI, are using ChatGPT, you know, in a kind of an agent model where we're asking it a question.
Like almost like Google.
Yeah, almost like Google, except a much better Google. People sometimes, when they're talking about AI, if they're not using it in that kind of interrogation model, are using the enormous AI systems that the likes of the Googles and the Amazons and everything have built to try and look at and solve very complicated problems. Right, by throwing a lot of data at it and looking for patterns and everything. So the agent piece is kind of an offshoot of all of that.
Yes.
But the idea that we can solve all the problems of the world with AI, I think it's more hype and bluster at this stage, but time will tell. But the amount of banks that are using it in very meaningful ways in the here and now is extremely few and far between, and it's mainly the majors.
Yes, and it's mostly because they've got the data to pull on. But there's a lot of vendors that are using it, right?
There's vendors using it, but the vendors make often grandiose, again, statements about their capabilities. So you have to be extremely careful about what questions to ask them.
Right.
There's lots of issues around who owns the data, the training data, which is your data. Like who owns that, intellectual property issues and all the rest of it. I'm very interested in its use in financial crime for obvious reasons. But the human element is going to be critical for a very long time because the errors are still extremely high.
Yes.
And and then if you're the MLRO and you're ultimately liable, do you want an AI do part of your job where at the end of the day you're still responsible? I think it'll be fascinating to see, Jess, how this
And I think the
plays
next
out.
5 years, I'm curious, worried about the impact on the junior positions in the market as people over rely on AI for the more mundane tasks of fin crime and compliance.
Yeah, and they even rely on it for doing PowerPoints and things, and I've seen that go horribly wrong even.
Oh, I tried to do one the other day and I was like, this is disgusting.
Yeah, like you'll make case studies. You ask AI for a case study, but unless you're extremely careful, the case study for the premise you're trying to support doesn't line up. You know, it's the facts and the it's all wrong.
But you know, if you're putting your PowerPoint through AI, you're probably in a bit of a hurry. So I doubt you're quality checking it like you should be.
You may not be quality checking.
Yeah.
So I think you're right that some of the junior jobs, could be at risk. Research stuff, that's problematic, I think.
Research stuff is, it's scary because, you know, the MIT study where they're talking about the cognitive, it just worked for me. I can't even say it.
Dissonance, is it?
Is that the word that I'm trying to talk about?
Yeah.
Where you're not connecting you're going from A to B without thinking about in between, and how, it's scary.
Yeah, it's scary. And critical thinking skills.
The critical thinking skills is really scary on university degrees and things.
Yeah.
They've got technology, obviously, that scans essays, but I'm so sure that even if you're not getting the ChatGPT or whatever to write the essays, you may be asking for the answers so you can write it's very scary because critical thinking is one of the main signs.
Yeah, and the prompts, which is basically your question to it.
Yeah. They
call it prompt engineering. I have a big kind of issue that the kind of diversity of the people on the front line there is wildly insufficient. Like the idea that we're consuming the energy of the entire planet practically for the data centers to fuel this thing, and that the engineers in the front line are predominantly white guys in the valley.
Yeah.
Like I have a serious problem with that. There's very few women, very few people of colour.
Because how does it work then? So say we're inputting 10,000 questions. Does it retain that data to then push out the answers later down the line? Is it like a brain that remembers things?
That's an excellent question. The memory capabilities, particularly of the agents, which is the one you and I have been using much, is poor. So they have a tendency to degrade in terms of both their safety protocols and the quality of over time.
Oh.
So I've even seen that where I try to save my answers, to build up and over time you expect it to get brighter, which you and I hopefully do. But actually it doesn't necessarily get brighter.
Because it runs out of brain space, essentially.
Well, it's kind of a complex thing. I've seen the technical explanations. We won't bore people talking about it, but it's the memory capabilities of the agents. You cannot assume that they get better and safer over time. It degrades. So when you're building these things, I suppose the lesson just for the audience here is when you're building these AI models or these AI things, you're never done. You have to keep training, you have to keep testing them, you have to keep monitoring them.
Keep testing them is a massive thing, isn't it? Because you just become reliant, you just assume, you make assumptions.
Yeah, and because some of them are a bit kind of black boxy, over time their answers can degrade to the point that they start coming out with stuff that really isn't what you intended in the first place. So it's a significant investment to keep on top of it all the time.
Yes.
It's not I put in my transaction monitoring system, now I can walk away. This stuff, you need to know why you're doing it, first of all. Like, what's the business case? Can you do it some other way without this?
Can you do it some other way? Because I had a really interesting conversation with a CCO that I know who's also an ex-lawyer, and he was really curious about the privacy around it. He said, if my team, my compliance team, are putting in questions around policies or questions around regulation and into Copilot, who has access to the questions that they're researching? And he found out it wasn't too hard to lift the hood and see exactly what all the questions of the staff are asking. And he said, what if someone in sales found out that my team are constantly co-piloting the answers to the question? The credibility's gone, the privacy's gone. It create absolute chaos.
Yeah, there's a lot of tough questions just to be asked where we don't really have the answers necessarily yet. Security is another one worries me, because it's very important you keep your training data and your test data separate.
Yes.
But they don't always secure the test data very well. And if it kind of pollutes the training data, you've kind of given it the question to the exam, So, but my hat always goes off to the marketers, because I used to be very involved in outsourcing. And then suddenly overnight, everybody was in the cloud. And I thought, the bloody cloud, like, it's just outsourcing. But now that it's the cloud, I don't have to worry about it. It's in the cloud. It's like a free thing in the sky. Yeah. So now we've got AI. And so many things fit under the hood of what it is.
Yeah, but you're right to talk about the data centers, because when they all go kaput, we're all in big trouble, aren't we?
Yeah. So I think for financial crime, it may have potential, but it doesn't solve the problem that we have in the here and now, which is poor data, missing data all over the place, and the fact that we don't necessarily have articulated the problem statement at all in the first place for it to solve.
If you were setting up you work at a fintech now, and you were setting up the function, would you implement AI with clean data starting from scratch? Or
if what I think the likes of the Chinese banks have a major advantage sometimes is they don't have all these legacy systems and everything. They start clean with their, beautiful Chinese architected, so they're not pulling legacy systems from all over the world with God knows what the quality of the data is and everything. So if you can do a clean build, that's lovely, because then all the problems that I spend most of my time dealing with are just
be a bit bored,
gone.
I think.
I might be a bit bored, but they have an advantage there, and that if they're starting. So I've seen interesting use cases where some of the Chinese banks have done incredible things in financial crime because they have a lovely clean architecture.
Yeah.
And they have access to probably a lot more data because privacy laws and everything wouldn't necessarily be
as stringent.
like ours.
Yeah.
They can really troll through this stuff. So, clean data. What a joyful thought that is. But I haven't seen it yet.
No, I think it's every MLRO's.
I've never seen that yet.
Yeah.
But hope that's eternal,
Okay, and just to wrap up, what's next? So you have been consulting. Well, consulting is the right word, contracting?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. I mean, what I'm trying to do is make myself free enough as well to do, I've got writing projects that I'm very interested in it. I was a journalist for a while, a freelance journalist. I did work at one stage for the Globe and Mail in Canada. I had a cybersecurity column. I have various book projects that I'm trying to get myself together to do, reading a lot of books on willpower and discipline and defeating procrastination.
It's the
so I can
feast of all contractors.
Yeah, so I'm not exactly Stephen King, but I can at least push more out there.
And when is it due for release, do you think?
Well, I like to self-publish, so that is really quite fascinating in that I do rely on Amazon for this, so I suppose heads off to Bezos for allowing me to do it. But within 48 hours, you can be live. So,
wow.
I've published before.
A Kindle edition or something?
Yeah, Kindle edition, but also they'll print as well too.
Wow.
So from the time you give them your own manuscript, you can be live within 48 hours. You just have to sit down and do it. But getting to market is the easy bit. And then the hard bit is publicising it.
Yes.
And figuring out how to do that without being all over the place.
And what's the theme of the new book?
Well, one thing that I'm very interested in is kind of a little series of books for young people, which kind of tries to encapsulate, I suppose, some of the stuff I've bored my own teams with lists over the years, and, reading lists or lessons that I've learned, how to navigate the current environment. So I've kind of got various themes in mind. So I'm going through that, and I'm always pulling articles and books that I carry with me everywhere, because I think maybe somebody else would find this useful.
Here's a question since you're here. What are your 2 books that are your must-reads?
It probably depends on the topics. I mean, there's a lot you can gain from literature as well as fiction. I read a hell of a lot of non-fiction, but there are books in fiction. Like, you can still learn a great deal from life I sound like a ponce here, but you can learn a lot from Dostoevsky,
Oh.
And I've read now that he's become a darling of some Instagrammers or something. God forbid, I thought.
Book talk.
Yeah, a book talk or something. But you can learn a lot from fiction. The obvious ones are obviously To Kill a Mockingbird. People learned a lot from that.
Yes.
So there have been writers who've taken stands that today resonate. So I'm very interested in people like that. I loved In Cold Blood, which Truman Capote created a new form of literature as a combination of fiction and non-fiction. But I'd have probably books in every category. So, but self-help books, I've read hundreds and hundreds, but I probably only have 5 or 6 that I would go back to and I would recommend to people on eclectic topics. So it's kind of watch this space, Jess, while I make the final cut.
Yeah. And you just make the recommendations in the book. And that's the plug for everyone to go read your book. Well, it's been really, really fantastic having you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Well, thank you for being so open and honest with your conversation. It was really...
I hope it helps someone.
Great. Cool.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.